All right, so some parts came in. New GX340 piston and ring kit. I know that I want to hone the cylinder if I can. So, I mean, the cylinder actually looks really good. And if I have room, I'd like to hone that cylinder. What I mean by if I have room. So when you're honing, you're taking some material away. Well, there's a thing called a ring in gap, and we measured that earlier, and we were outside of spec. So the spec for this thing, for the top ring, is 10 to 20 thousandths. Before we start taking material away, let's make sure that our 10 to 20 thousandths is there. Let's put a little bit of fresh oil on there. It's a nice thin coat. Looking at the old rings, this chrome plated one was on the top and the non-chrome plated one was on the bottom. And I can already tell you that it's sitting much better. Let's see that down a little bit. Make sure that it's flat. There you go, that's about flat right there. And what I'm looking for on the gauge is it has to fit no tighter than this one and no looser than the 20 thousandths. So it needs to be between those two. 10 goes through with no problem. And 20 does fit. It's dragging a little bit. Make sure that I'm sitting flat in there. Okay, so 20 just, I mean, I can squeeze it in there. It's really tight. So right now the end gap is actually just about perfect. So if I'm going to hone this, it's just barely going to be anything. I don't want to take a lot of material away. So it tells me that the cylinder wall, took some of the material. Some of the material from the cylinder wall is gone. So let's just hone this just barely, just enough to get a little bit of cross hatching occurring. Get a good amount of oil in there. It's also good to coat the stones too. If I can get any of it on the stones. Okay. Yeah, didn't do much, but like I said, I'm already working at a disadvantage because those rings are already pretty, at their maximum. Now I've got some cross hatching going on in there. I don't know if y'all can see that. Yeah, let's check this one more time. as straight as possible. Yep, that's 20. And 21 doesn't quite fit. So I'm right at my maximum. The old one was sitting about 35 thousandths. So pretty significant difference. And the carbon ring right about the same. I think the carbon ring is supposed to have a little bit more, but I think it was up to 25 thousandths. Let's get the oil ring on. So on the oil ring itself, there is a lip on the back side. So this part has to go first. Okay, and then one of these rings will go on the bottom of that oil ring, and the other one's going to go on the top. Just like that. Let's face them opposite directions. The opening, we're going to face the opening opposite directions. There you go, should look something like that. Then I've got a carbon ring that goes next. Give this a little bit of lube just in case I got hung up on an edge here. All right, so carbon ring goes next. There's an N on here that usually faces up. And on this one, there wasn't any writing to tell me which one's up, and there's no bevel to it to tell me which one's up. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it on. The rings are on, and in case I forget to say it later, we're going to be staggering these rings. So one of them's going to be off to one side, the other one's going to be off to the other side, so that any pressure that comes through here has to work all the way around to come through the side, the other slit as it's working its way down. And then the oil scraper ring, it's not that critical, but I also offset those. That usually is about here, and then these two would be opposite each other. And I like having them on the sides versus being on the top and the bottom. Seems like I get a little, logically it tells me, or I believe that it actually lasts longer because the ring end gap is on the sides instead of being on the top or bottom where it might get more pressure one way or another. Now the arrow faces that way, arrow faces that way. So we're going to do it just like this, just to make sure it goes back the exact same way. Get our keeper ring removed. Pull our wrist pin out. Before I get it all the way out, let's go ahead and get one of these keepers installed on the other one. There we go, and I like to have the opening on these facing straight up. Just make sure it's seated in there really well. Okay, arrow still facing that direction. Pull the wrist pin out. Wrist pin goes right back inside there. There's plenty of oil, otherwise I would say you needed to lubricate that, but I mean, this thing's got tons of oil. See, the openings on these, on the old wrist pin keepers, are right where the two notches are. But I've always been told put them, you know, straight up and down to the piston. So I'm noticing that my keeper is not dropping into the groove. It tells me that my wrist pin, which I was supposed to change, was longer than what it should have been. So, new wrist pin it is. Honestly, I forgot that I had one, and I was just used to throwing the old one back in from all the chainsaws and stuff, but there we go. That one looks better. And an easy way to tell is usually you can spin that thing around. Just look and see if it tries to jump out on you. Yep, looks like it's in there pretty well. All right, let's get the rings set where we want them. So that one's going that way. That one's going that way. And my oil rings appear to be staggered, and one's at the top and one's at the bottom. Let's lube up the ring compressor. If you guys don't have a ring compressor, you can usually borrow them from automotive shops. O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Advanced Auto, things like that. I guess they call them renting the tool, because that's actually why I have this one. I rented it. And when they rang it up, the total cost was like $10 or something like that. And I was like, well, for $10, I'm not returning this. And they said, that's fine, you can keep it. And now I don't have to go to the store every time I need one. Just making sure I'm flat all the way around. Okay, put a little dab of assembly lube on the connecting rod journal. Some oil on the cylinder. Arrow facing down. Pretty sure that's what we said when we took it out. Now that's going to hold the rings compressed as I drive them down, but I'm going to hold tension on this to keep it flat against the head, and I'm going to try to use the bottom of a hammer to just tap it into place. And my crank is out of the way. It needs a little bit more. All right, so you guys missed all the fun. Part of it I was too busy struggling with it to remember, and it was taking me a long time to get it out of there. But this brand new piston I put together with the rings that were correct, the piston itself, and it didn't even occur to me to try to push it all the way in, the brand new piston itself is too big. So the brand new piston itself, it's almost impossible to move right about there. It's not machined quite right. I mean, I can turn it and just barely get it to go. So if I get it upside down, I can get it to go in. Anyway, it's just slightly wrong. Anyway, it took me a lot of effort to get it back out, and in the process I actually messed up this piston, but I wasn't going to use it anyway once I realized that it wasn't machined properly. So this genuine parts piston isn't going to work for me. So what I did, I took the new rings and I put them on the old piston, and we're going to use that. I got the old wrist pin back out. Let's lube that up. Yeah, I had to fight that thing something fierce to get it out of there. Pry bars, you name it. I was able to protect the new rings, but yeah, it's just, I mean, it's so close of a tolerance, it's just not there. So but I am going to use the brand new rings. Is that in there good? Yes. So my rings are staggered, one off this side, one off that side. Chrome is on the top. Got my oil scraper rings on there, and they're staggered. One's on one side, one's on the other. Let's get the ring compressor put back on. Everything's still oiled up really well. It was actually kind of comical how off that was and getting me to fight with that. It didn't score up anything on the cylinder. I was very fortunate there. And I was able to protect the rings because I knew I needed them. Okay. So it's almost tight enough. Make sure everything's nice and seated flush. And it should pop in just like that. Yeah, that was a little bit frustrating. Now we have our bearing cap. Going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on those. And a drop of assembly lube right here on the bottom. Grab a 10 mil, and I'm just literally going to take up the slack on these, and then we're going to torque them. I'm showing connecting rod bolts. It's an M8 by 1.25 special, and it is showing that it is 14 Newton meters or 10 foot-pounds. All right, 10 foot-pounds. So now I've got a couple of tappets to put in. A little assembly lube to help hold it in place. And then the cam gear has a timing mark right there, which needs to line up with just like that. So that dot's lined up with that dot right there. And then my counterbalance has a timing mark on it. Right there. So that timing mark right there needs to line up with the timing mark that is right there. Timing mark there lines up with that timing mark. And then that timing mark and that timing mark should line up. All right, it seems to line up pretty good. I'm really on the fence about sealing this thing. You're not supposed to, but I think I'm gonna seal one side. I've already cleaned up all my surfaces, obviously. Okay, we're gonna put this on. It's all sealed up. So this is one bearing. This is the other bearing. So when this goes on, let's see, this one here goes on the counterbalance. This journal right here goes on the crankshaft, excuse me, camshaft. And then of course the main bearing is right here. And then this right here is your governor. You notice as it spins around, those arms spin out. See how they spin out? That's what's driving this governor arm right here. So that's not going to fall out. I do have a locator pin right there. And it's made out of plastic, so I'm not going to force anything because this helical gear has to mesh up with that helical gear. All right, well that side's setting up a little bit. Let's grab our new seal. Just get some sealer on the outside of it. Nice thin coat. We want to set this in just to that surface. Whoops. Make sure I didn't mess up my other gasket. All right, a little bit of assembly lube right here on the crankshaft. Make sure I turn the motor a little bit. Just make sure that that governor doesn't get pinched. That's in line. The governor's not even touching yet. Crankshaft looks in line. Let me set this down. There we go. She drew right in. So you don't want to force it. Blue Loctite on all these. Let's get them run down kind of close. All right, crankcase bolts are 17 foot-pounds. Just making sure that seal is exactly flat all the way around. All right, so the other thing I ordered was a brand new head for this thing. Let's see, the studs need to be changed over. The rest of it looks really close. See how bad this is. We're going to try a set of van pliers real quick just to see. Grab it around the shoulder. Well, that one came off pretty easy. If it didn't come off fairly easy, what you do is put a double nut on there, so two nuts of the exact same size. Tighten them together, and then you grab the inner nut. You basically take those two nuts, tighten them together, grab the inner nut, and just loosen it up. But I gotta tell you, these van pliers are fantastic for just this purpose. As long as you're not messing up the threads, you gotta have a shoulder to grab a hold of. Okay. And the two exhaust studs. Let me see if the intakes come off just as easy. Well, that one was already really loose. And again, this one here, really loose. I'm not even using the jaw part. I'm literally just using the grabber part right now. There's teeth at the very end, and then I'm just using the part that's up here in the middle that's more of a, I don't know, more of a hex shape. So it looks like got a plate right there I need to move over. The reason why I swapped the head, I don't know if that was on video or not. Basically, I put a straight edge right here where that spot was burned, and I had light passing underneath where that spot was burned, so it basically warped right there. That's why it's got a brand new head. I don't remember if we talked about that or not. So they gave me some new locator pins. Brand new head gasket. So they even gave me new mounting studs. I'm going to stay with what I got. These were the factory studs. Sometimes aftermarket ones aren't quite as strong. It's just a gamble. So the head bolts are 25 foot-pounds. I want to make sure I get it seated down in there properly. "25 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern." Exhaust gasket, intake gasket. We need to get the push rods put in. Let's get these backed off. Couple couple of push rods. All right, we need to find top dead center. So let's see, right now that seems to be top dead center, because if I turn this, that one starts to come up. All right, and then right at the top, right there, this one's going to start going back down, and now this one's coming up. Okay, so now this is my intake stroke, which means that the next top dead center is going to be that's now my top dead center. Push those back down. Get these. So the intake valve is supposed to be 6 thousandths. The exhaust valve is supposed to be 8 thousandths. Looks like that stud tried to come loose on me. Which means that you are getting some Loctite. Also means I'm going to do this other side as well. Yeah, that one wasn't very tight either. If that came loose, your valve adjustment would just keep changing on you. So that is no good. Couldn't get my valves adjusted right. Turned out to be that's all it was. All right, so I want 6 thousandths on this one. I got 6 thousandths on that one. Let's see, hold the outside nut. about right. All right, y'all, I think I'm back to where we left off. Complete transparency, all honesty, whatever you want to call it. I had assembled everything last night. My audio died. Just finished taking it back apart to the spot where I think I left off. That way we can put this thing together. Yeah, hey. Put a new gasket onto the valve cover. Get that snug. All right, let's get this plate put on. So one back here, one up here, and one over here. Let's get the carburetor on. I already scraped the manifold plate, put it in place, put a new gasket here. The coil wire, fairly confident it snaps right in here, like that. I'll find out here in a little bit. All right, then the carburetor, new carburetor. The owner handed me one. So we need to get our governor spring, our governor rod, and our governor return spring hooked up. So then a gasket. Let's put just a holder on there for now, just to keep all my gaskets in place. Flywheel cover on. It doesn't belong just yet. One up here. Starter cover, or starter, I guess. Starter and starter cover. I went digging and found some hardware for these things. And there's no oil in this thing, but there is the assembly lube that I just put in there. Yeah, I got good vacuum and pressure onto that. And I think I forgot a spring. This, the governor return spring. Should be something like that. And that. Okay, I had to go back and watch it. The governor spring's not making much sense to me. The way that it was hooked up before was right in here, right up there, and then attached down here. So it's kind of loose. What I've noticed, I guess that would pull on the governor. you know, fight back against the governor, right? Or actually, yeah, fight back against the governor. So it'd be like a governor return spring, but it's kind of loose. So I might have a problem with it running there. I'm not sure. We're going to get to the bottom of that too. I really don't want to do a compression test on it dry like this, like no oil in it, even though it is lubricated. Feeling pretty good about what I have so far. I would like to go ahead and mount this thing, run it a little bit before we have an opportunity to do a compression test or something like that on it. And I don't want to put the oil in it just yet because I'm going to be flipping it up on its side to mount it. The exhaust gasket I've got sitting off to the side, we'll put it on last. Again, I'm going to be putting it up and down. I'm not going to put the drive gear until I've got it mounted inside that buggy too, because that was another thing I was fighting with when I was trying to put it in there. I have cleaned it up. I do plan on putting some anti-seize on there, but let me get the cart ready and get it set to put the motor in it.